For the record, I used to like snow. Not so much anymore.
What an opening, my friend.
Well, we're all thawed out up here. How about you down there, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, to think about the great state of Texas, how big it is, there actually is a significant difference between saying up here and down there. So the couple 100 miles between our two cities actually is pretty impactful. No, we're doing better. The big fallback, really, I think across the board for us was loss of water. Um, uh, so that's been the main thing. Some of us are addressing some of those things, but what's been fascinating is to look at the temperature having gone from 7 degrees to 84 degrees today in that just snap like that. You've got to love Texas.
Oh yeah. Well, it literally, and I'm not kidding when I say this. 1 week ago today, we had a low of -14 with the wind chill. I think the actual temperature was like less than was -2. Today, I was at 80 degrees. We literally went from less than 0 to 80 in a week. It is. So here's the thing, right? This is insane. And this is something a lot of the Texans don't understand. Or not Texans, but people who don't live in Texas, rather, don't get. Where I live in North Texas, just south of Dallas, we get cold weather about 2 weeks out of every year, about around this time. Sometimes, it'll hit around Christmas. Usually it's in, late December, early February, early to mid-February. We'll get a good cold snap of about 2 weeks. And everything is covered with snow, but mostly ice, right? And then we're done. Now, most years it's not too bad, but we've had some bad years. So we're always prepared for it. We usually, when it gets bad, it'll get into the teens, like 13, 14 degrees. That's a bad year for us. I think a bad year for where you are, Nick, is just below freezing with some snow, right? Like you don't get 2 weeks of ice like we do up here. Like the worst you ever get is just below freezing. Is that usually what you get?
We can sustain the ice. We get that as well. That black ice that's kind of notorious here in Central Texas, and it's certainly up where you are. But what was fascinating about this was just the duration. It just seemed like we couldn't crawl out of those temperatures for a while. So even when we started to break through in the daytime, at night everything would just refreeze. So we would start
exactly.
And being that, for my friends and family out there on the show tonight, you guys know that, I drive a car that's basically a roller skate. And so I couldn't get it out of my garage, let alone to the store, which wouldn't have mattered because by going to the store, there was no food anyway. So there was no purpose. So I've learned how to become an extremely proficient gas station shopper. I have developed an entirely new skill set.
Well, there you go. There you go. That's what I love about you. You adapt, you overcome. But again, 2 weeks, ice, North Texas, no big deal. You do get cold, you do get ice, but again, not this bad. Here's the thing. I'm North Texas. You're technically Central Texas. The entire state of Texas was covered in sub-zero weather. The coast, Galveston, had snow on the beach. That's how cold it got. And this is something that the last time people have talked about. We'll talk about the power situation here in a second, but and people have pointed to when we had the Super Bowl up here at Jerry World, right? And they're like, well, it got cold then, and y'all didn't have any problems. It's like, well, yeah, it got cold. Don't get me wrong. Again, 2 weeks, North Texas, no big deal. But Houston didn't freeze. Like Houston is off of the water. Galveston is on the bay. It froze. The entire state of Texas froze in not just freeze, sub-zero temperatures. This would be like people in not even New York, people in Canada having a heat wave of 110 or 115 degrees for a week. That's how insane this was. And this was a natural disaster. This wasn't even something that could be predicted. The closest we've gotten to something like this happening was like 1890. Was in the 1890s. Literally, this thing happens like once every 120 to 150 years. Like, this was an insane event, and it caused a lot of havoc. But as Texans, we pull through, and we were helping each other. That's what we do. What disappointed me, though, was just other people wanting to talk about, wanting to dunk on Texas because of the power grid. Like, that was what I found disappointing. It's like, people are literally freezing to death. I know someone whose grandmother died from this weather. To see people trying to dunk on Texas and be like, ha ha, is beyond disgusting to me. And I find myself absolutely disgusted at that. And people trying to throw politics into this. Instead of saying, well, what have we learned? What can we do? What are the real takeaways? It's both sides, but everyone tried to throw some kind of politics into this, and it's absolutely disgusting. This was a natural disaster. This wasn't something that happens every year, or every 10 years, or every 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 or even 100 years. It was a natural disaster.
Yeah, I'd like to just jump in and tell our listeners tonight, if they think they're on the wrong channel, we are reformatting the show. We are now going to be at a new weather channel. Welcome to Not Playing Politics, the geopolitical / weather influence of your day-to-day and week-to-week. No, look, I'm trying to keep lighthearted of some things here. The long and short of it is basically what we've been able to see is that, given an opportunity, people will fall back into the standard practice or lens with which they feel most comfortable. I was trying to think about this earlier today and yesterday a bit, and my father called me last night. We had a good talk, and for those of you who know my father out there, my father's not an easily shaken person. He's someone that is very committed to what he believes and very much understands and knows why he believes what he believes. It's one of the greatest gifts that I think he tried to bestow upon me. But the fact that I'm getting at is that he would
not your ears
and my ears, those Southern Italian features. But what he would talk about is talking about the disheartening feeling of watching things like the Supreme Court opting not to take up certain cases or things going on with regard to just standard operating procedures of our democracy. And, wanting to use this show again as a platform for good conversation and debate and engagement. The one thing I came up with is I have a lot of people that I admire very much in my life that will contact me and talk with levels of measurable fear or anxiety or concern in their voice. With my father, it was more disgust or frustration. But the point that I'm getting at is the answer that I came up with, and I'm not sure why it popped out so easily. He's like, why do you see this as happening? And my response was fear. And if I can take a minute here, I'll explain why I got to that. Why I got to that was to say this. I think when something happens in any of our lives, I'm not trying to sound remotely prophetic, guys. I'm just saying the thought that popped into my head was when something in our life of consequence truly happens, the death of a loved one, the diagnosis of a major sickness, the loss of a job, whatever the situation can be. I think one of two reactions can sometimes take place. I'm sure there are myriad reactions in addition, but these were the two that came to my mind. One of two things happens. I believe we are either awakened or we are put to sleep. For example, when I say awakened, I have many friends that honorably serve in our nation's military. And for many of them, when they have deployed, that feeling of, oh my gosh, were you scared? Were you frightened? Is something that they it's not because they're just so inherently brave, which I do believe they are, and I recognize that, but it's because they have committed themselves to making the decision that what they're doing is necessary, important, and what they've committed themselves to do. Dear friend of mine on her travel back from lovely Afghanistan, where she was under, full Kevlar uniform items and a strapped 9mm, put up on her social media on her way back, heading back to Texas soon, starting to get sad about missing these guys. And when I talked to her about that later, I said, did you really mean that, you were actually feeling discomfort about coming home to, Best Buy and cheeseburgers? And she was like, absolutely. While I was over there, the work I was doing was so important. While I was over there, the reason we were there was so impactful, was so important. Quick side note, guys, she literally just started texting me. That's bizarre. It was neat to see when she said I had that level of accountability, that level of keeping your head on the swivel all the time, making yourself as sharp as you can possibly be. I've spoken with several people, some listening to the show tonight, who have explained their experience through deployment, how they shared that it made them a better man, a better husband, a better father, a better brother than they ever thought they were capable of being. And those people know who they are, and they know how much they've impacted my life with their presence and their love and support. But what I'm getting at is, for many of them, these stories resonated with me with a form of awakening. They became aware. It sparked something to do something. Could it be fear? Sure, fear of the unknown, fear of death, fear of letting their team down, not completing the mission, whatever you want to call it. The flip side of that to me is being put to sleep. And what I mean by being put to sleep is not euthanizing yourselves, but maybe it's euthanizing thought. And that is not engaging with things based off of fact and based off of intent to discuss, but rather literally sticking your fingers in your ears and going la, 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 because you don't want to hear something. And I think the way that we do that is by looking through things through certain lenses. For people that look at their job as being valuable, that they want to contribute, they look through the lens of patriotism or service, faith, country, family, whatever they want. But for those who look at it differently, they sometimes use a very powerful and contemporarily really overused lens, which is politics. So to your point, Alex, about how dare they take these things on? You know, people cheering that the grid was failing to show, you see, if they would have had green energy, this wouldn't have happened. When you use politics as the only lens, and that lens is being fueled by having shut off or euthanized ways to think, I think it gets really, really dangerous, because what you do is cut off all channels to think. And when you sacrifice thinking and then amplify it through a single lens, you miss not only communicating with people, but you miss being taken seriously, except by those who are in your diehard camp, which, as we've talked about on this show, it seems like many are going into those more and more deeply each and every single day.
Well, it's tribalism, right? It's gotchaism. It's not even trying. It is a replacement, like you said. It's not. But even below that, I'm saying even deeper than that. It's like you said. I think you pointed this out very well. It's a replacement for thinking. It's not looking at a worldview or a situation and saying, okay, what worked, what didn't work, what can we take away? Let's actually examine it. It's just, what can I do to reinforce my worldview? Now, the thing is, your worldview may be burning down 99% of the time, and to see a flaw in someone else, it's just for you. It's something that you can use to again, like you said, not think and sort of hang your hat on why you're right. And here's the thing, and let me be real honest here. We saw both sides do this. Now we'll talk about Senator Cruz here in a little bit, but I want to talk about how immediately the right attacked the wind turbines and the left attacked natural gas, nuclear power, and coal.
But this was all, I'm hopping real quickly. This was all fear-based, because it's also that level of accountability, right? When something goes wrong, if you don't have a legitimate answer and are willing to step up and say, this is where we fell short, what you do is you say it was the other guy's fault.
Oh, precisely. No, precisely. And so let me even state this. I want to remove the grid conversation itself, like the actual grid, what went right, what went wrong, those kinds of that conversation, aside for just a second, because that is actually in many ways completely irrelevant from the conversation that most people were having, right? Because the people on the right were like, see, if we all had green energy, this is what would happen. And the left said, but your reliance on these other traditional forms of energy is what cost you. The problem is they're both right and wrong, right? That's the thing, is instead of saying, hold on, let's see. Well, first of all, no one even stopped to say this was a freak event. The power needs is literally unparalleled. The problem with all of this is it's designed for a very different environment. I mean, literally, we basically took Texas and moved. It's like we may have just moved it to Canada for like a week and then moved it back down. That's essentially what happened. So nothing's designed to handle those temperatures. And the problem is, most people forget, Things are designed to work in one environment or another. You can't, very few things can work in two different, radically different environments. That's sort of the first point. Secondly, everyone just assumes that power production is easy. It ain't, I assure you. And regulating the grid is one of the most complicated things you've ever seen. So again, most people just say, well, the power doesn't come on, something has gone wrong. Yeah, there were things we could take away from all this, but instead of saying, let's have an intelligent conversation about the grid, we went to politics. And everyone started pointing the finger because it's easier than actually having a real conversation, right? I mean, that's really the thing is each tribe took the part of the story or the narrative that they wanted that made their side look good, and they clanged. I'm gonna go with clanged. They clanged on to it. They cleaved to it. There we go. We'll use a good biblical word there. They cleaved to the narratives, and just put it. And they started shooting at each other that way, metaphorically speaking. In case anyone from the left is actually listening, that's a metaphor. But they and then they started fighting over that. And the problem is, I don't know if any just speaking as a native Texan, I was just kind of like, hey guys, people are literally dying here. It's like, this is like, people are dying here. We're trying to, can we actually solve this problem and then y'all can fight this out? But no, it was just they just took their sides. And they didn't take the totality of the truth, and they just started shooting because it replaces actual thinking and actually resolving situations for the, because the need in Texas was immediate. We got it resolved, and of course it's over. We're back up to 80 degrees. Everything's hunky dory now. Like, I was even thinking about this. I'm like, I kind of want to. I had preparations. Like I said, I'm usually prepared for 2 weeks, but there were some things we didn't have, and I'm like, you know what? I want to kind of prepare for that next time. But it occurs to me that I'm not going to need this the next time. It's going to be another 120 years before I need this this kind of an event. But it just, everyone resulted. They just like, here's the part of the story I want to take out of context, and I want to, because I feel like it benefits my side, and let's go. And they just started shooting at each other instead of saying, hey, let's actually learn something from this event. What can we learn? How can we expand? How can we grow? What can we do better? What can we do? What did we do badly, and just that conversation immediately turned to tribal politics because it's easier than actually thinking. And I think, Nick, you have made a beautiful point that tribal politics replaces actual thought because actual thought is hard.
I just want to state for the record that you said the point that I made was beautiful. That's just something I want documented here on the internet. No, I think, look, there's nothing I'm saying. We don't bring people to our channel because we've got some groundbreaking political, sociological, religious, ecumenical, historical perspective that's there. I think what we wanted to do in this show is bring together a place to say the words out loud and to just have that conversation going, and to realize that a lot of the stuff we're seeing, we can say, okay, hold on a minute. But in pre-production, every time you and I talk about this, I want to credit you, Alex, in front of everybody here. Your entire focus on this show has always been geared at what can we do? What can we do? What is the objective? In talking to my dad last night, he was I wish I could recall the phrase right now. He was teaching me, the old saying, you guys know I don't like to really swear. It was the saying, don't let the bad guys get you down, right? But the term they use, don't let the bad guys get you down. But he, in my father's wonderful, wonderful manner, he was teaching me it in Latin. And for those on the show who know my dad, know that's so perfectly aligned with who he is. But what that struck with me, the reason I share that with everybody tonight, is that what I realize is, in watching what's going on, this is where I think the greatest sacrifice of what we're doing is truly going to take effect. Guys, I'm going to be honest with everybody on this channel. I am not a politically driven person. For most people who know me, the concept of identifying through even a party is not something that really has ever been on my radar. I understand that looking at the contemporary political landscape, I can assure you that there are ideologies that all seem to be accumulating on one side that I would say probably don't align with my worldview. So that can be what it is. But the concept of a party deliberatively bringing me about to make a decision, to join a party. That's not my perspective. I don't know for you guys if that is either. I think a lot of us, in large part, want to just be able to live our lives peacefully with our loved ones and try to live with the government as uninvolved as possible. And I think that, and I'm not talking about to that extreme either, right? But here's the concern that I have. The greatest thing that I think we're stripping people of, whether it's through policing language, First and Second Amendment restrictions, first identity politics. I saw a title of a paperwork written earlier, and it said "The Dark Religion of Identity Politics," and I was like, "Wow, that's intense." What I think we're stripping is thought, and not just thought like I want to feel something to think and then explain that. I mean, actually stripping away history, faith, and we're doing it in ways that I think are kind of subversive. Follow me on this for just a second. Alex, you mentioned the thing about Senator Cruz. Maybe I'm way out there on a limb, but for those of us that were here in Texas, I don't know exactly what it is that he would be able to do. I understand you want to stay near your team when going through an event. And, do I think it was the best call? I don't know that he thought it was the best call, but I do think that as a father, he also made a decision with regard to being a parent. But I think that through the lens of politics, we look at these senators as people that are not fathers and maybe not parents and not this. I think it was a dad who made a decision based off the information we have to take his daughter on a trip. Did it happen at the most inopportune time? Yes. Did the media take absolute advantage of it? Yes. Is the false equivalency being drawn up that they're trying to compare him to what's been going on in New York under Governor Cuomo? I think that's cartoonishly inaccurate. I mean, it's not even worth discussing. I've started to wear a new badge of courage, and that badge of courage is now when my friends will call and say, "I know you've read this. Did you see this?" And my response now is like, "Nope, didn't see that one." And I almost feel better, not because I'm trying to stick my head in the ground as an ostrich and shut myself off and go to sleep, but because I'm realizing that seeking the news through certain channels isn't going to cause awakening. It's going to cause disturbance, because the news itself is a product and it's designed to keep you on their product. It's a slow drip to keep you attached to where it is. It creates the need and then fulfills the need. And the need it fulfills is recreating a new need. And it just cycles over and over and over again. So my point to get to this is, in your assessment that you've always made, Alex, it's what can we do? What can we do? So when we talked in pre-production, we broke down, okay, what are we going to address? Well, the storm itself was impactful. But the political storm coming from it, whether people want to talk about going after Governor Abbott, or now Beto O'Rourke wants to run for governor, or push these things into these channels, because it's always government's fault whenever something happens, good, bad, or indifferent. Either way, the other side is going to blame the other side and say, I would have done it better and I would have done it differently. We've seen with the new administration in the White House that there has not been a lot of change going on with regard to COVID. In fact, there are stories coming out that maybe we're missing a lot of opportunities, potentially. I'll leave it there. What I'm going to say is this. The stripping away of being able to have education. I mean, teachers in the classroom helping students get back to school. I'm talking about policing language, where students are being segregated in classrooms based off of their voluntary segregation through student organizations based off of race or sex or gender, however they want to view the topic of how they see those subjects. I think that's one of the most dangerous things we could possibly have. And the person to lose at the end is the individual. And I'll end by saying I think that that is something that, if we want to focus on this show, it's for the edification of explaining what words mean. Recently attended a training and they were using some words about, they wanted to talk about the significance of intersectionality. So I asked the group that I was speaking with what they thought. But I opened with the word, I opened by saying, how many of you know what intersectionality actually means? And I was speaking with a group that I respect very deeply. And what I appreciated was that someone just raised their hand and said, I have no idea what that means. I need to go look that up. And I appreciated that transparency, because there's so many words being thrown around now that we don't know what they mean. We're not having any type of discussion, and we're putting people to sleep with this overload of simplification of things that are going on. Hey, did you hear that Ted Cruz went to Mexico? Wow, that's kind of, man, these senators, they're terrible. He's as bad as that Cuomo guy. That's just dangerous. And false equivalencies lead to that, and they lead to the subversion of us thinking thoughtfully and having engaging conversations with each other. I know I went a little off the rails on that one, but I did it because I wanted to address the fact that with this storm, with this tragedy, once again, enter the politique, and that's what we've seen. I haven't seen great
Well,
debates going on about thinking about new power sources. I've seen the same old things. If you did the Green New Deal, it wouldn't have happened. I don't believe that. But it's simple
exactly.
to the lowest factor.
Well, so let me go back to something you said, right? And yes, this is why our logo is what it is. We've made politics, instead of the hammer, the tool that is used to build the house we all live in, we've made it a game. We like you said, we're not even really educating ourselves. We are dumbing down the conversation so much so that it becomes simply a contact sport, instead of being the thing what it's supposed to be, how we survive, how we live in a society. I've been watching the comments, and I mean that is the problem, right? We have a news media, and I'm not even going to say old media, lamestream, no, media period, that's new, old, social media is media at this point. It is designed to addict you. I think Salty One hit it on the head. This is addiction. I mean, people have talked about things like addiction to the internet for years now. This is not new. This is going to sound completely unrelated, but it's not. I assure you. Give me a second. One of the things that's been really controversial in like video games are these like loot boxes and these things that you can pay to buy things in a video game, right? Particularly for online video games like that you play on your smartphone. Well, kids, they would just, it's like, what's $2 here, $2 here, and it's like, well, I get, for $2 I get this new thing, I get this, but you've racked up $300 or $400 by the end of the month. And a lot of video games, like some of the larger ones, like you could pay $10 and get, sort of a crate, and whatever's in it is completely random, right? But it's some sort of an upgrade. You're paying for it. You just don't know what you're going to get. And it's all done very deliberately, because these microtransactions actually, they're taking just a little bit out of it at a time, and you don't feel like it's a big thing. It's 99 cents here, $2 here, 75 cents here, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's small enough that it doesn't register on your radar. So you're paying it out. And then the reason you do it is that when you get that little dopamine hit, it reaffirms that you want to do that some more. Because dopamine is actually, they've been doing a lot of experiments recently, and they've started to understand that it's not just about pleasure, like like a reward. It's not really a reward. It's more like completion. It's the dopamine hit reinforces that that's something you want to do, because a lot of this actually goes back to survival. And so these little things actually become addictive. In the same way, things like Twitter, Facebook, all the others, when someone likes your comment or shares your something that you posted, you get a dopamine hit. It's designed to get you to search for those things. We have an entire society now of dopamine addicts, and we're getting it through our digital media and here's the thing: fear is a big driving force. That's why people love playing these first-person shooters. Now that we've got the technology to really make them look good, people love them. Why? Because there is honest fear. They do measure fear responses in these games. That's why the news media, we're kind of designed to look for fear. The news media, regardless of what, whether it's digital or online, or, well, obviously all digital's online, but my point is, be it social or CNN or whatever, or even Fox, everyone wants to point to what's big and bad and scary, because you want to look for that. And these are dopamine hits. And so we've become addicted to bad news. And here's the thing: we've even become addicted to hating one another, because you post a video of Ben Shapiro. It's like top 10 Ben Shapiro roasts, and everyone's liking it, you're getting that hit. Well, someone comes around and you tweet something, and then somebody comes around and has a clapback. Well, that clapback gets likes, and so it's this spiral. We're not actually achieving anything. We're getting dopamine hits for actually encouraging the destruction of society, not making the world better. A great example. Let's go back to Ted Cruz. The conversation should have gone like this. Did you hear Ted Cruz left? Well, okay. I mean, yeah, it looks bad. He is he's a leader, blah, blah, blah. But the first words out of my mouth would have been, well, but he's a he's a federal senator. He has literally no power here. And he actually literally had no power. He was without power. Well, since everything that's been going on, and they were on a break. What was he supposed to do?
But again, this underlies the concept of stripping people of the intellect to understand how government and the officers of that government operate.
Uh-huh.
Ted Cruz
exactly
to the wrong side of the political milieu in power right now. Therefore, he's potentially bad. Excuse my interruption on that. It's that engagement, right? It doesn't matter. Ted Cruz is a firebrand anyway. He stands out even in Republican circles. People have their own beliefs on where he is. But the point that I'm getting at is that when you strip away the idea, I mean, ask people right now. Hey guys, really quickly. Excuse me, Alex. Do you mind if I hop in just 2 seconds? Let's do an experiment. You ready? Do it in real time.
Yep.
Because I have a comment to what you're saying. What you're touching in is actually very important to the work that I did in graduate school, and I actually very much want to speak to it. But here we go. All right, guys, we're kicking this out to you in real time. Let's play on the internet. Let's see who's engaged here. I want somebody right now. By no means is this designed to create any type of animosity or any type of you don't know what you're talking about. It's designed to see how much of the people listening to this show, who I would defend as probably more capable, more mindful, more aware of how their government operates. Let me ask you this. Do me a favor and create a response. Just shoot up a quick response. Here's the question I'm going to ask. How many senators do we have? How long is their term? How many representatives do we have in the House completely? How long is their term? And how many? No, that's fine. Just those two. How many senators, their term, and how many representatives in their term? I'm not doing this to prove anybody to be stupid. I'm doing this because I believe this show will identify that the percentages I'm willing to bet you guys come up with are going to be vastly higher than a lot that are probably out on the street if you were to ask people. What's the total number of their representatives that they're seeing? And the reason I'm posing this question is because when you don't have a functioning, working understanding of your own government, and even if we use this show as a teachable moment right now for us to go Google that, because trust me, I would furiously be Googling anything I could to find out what it is. But my point is, the reason I'm asking you guys to do this is because with full transparency, that you answer honestly, all right? That you just don't Google it, try to answer it. And if you don't feel comfortable answering, you do not have to by any means. This is not a shaming incident. It's to say, if you go back to the days of jaywalking and all these things, and you ask people on the street, how many justices are there in the Supreme Court? How are they put up for nomination? Who certifies senators? Are senators elected publicly, or are they elected by their state representatives? Are congressmen capable of serving a limited or unlimited time? And that's why I say that. The concern that I see is that when you ask questions like this, we want this show to be that level of engagement. And when we were talking in pre-production a little bit, how do we get people out there to do this? I think by knowing how it works. I have a dear friend in California who was writing me in absolute panic. She's literally flying her flag, as I understand it, upside down. And she's like, I feel absolute terror about what's going on. But she's like, but I don't know how to go about the channels to reach out to anybody. So we discussed reaching out to her school board, reaching out to the city council, reaching out to her mayor's office, her representative's office, going to get legal advice from local area. She had questions with regard to military procedure, going speaking with the judge advocate general's office and understanding why they do it. All right, so here we go. I'm gonna call out a salty one here because I'm willing to bet that this is representative of what all of you know. So senators, yeah, obviously there's 102 per state, and we have 6 years is their term. That's fantastic. You've already seen pushback, Alex, when people say, well, it's unfair that a state like Montana gets as many senators as New York, because people don't have a fundamental understanding of what federalism and what the Electoral College is based on with regard to equal representation. They don't understand bicameralism. They don't understand what's going on. And I don't say that with joy, like I'm so smart and they're so dumb. I'm saying as we look at it, and Mr. D. Knuckles is absolutely right. No term limits. That's what's in place. That's why some of these laws, with Ted Cruz at the helm, they're pushing now for term limitations, which I would like to publicly make record right here. And I will absolutely get on the record and say, I absolutely endorse term limits. 100%. If I were to run for,
you endorse them?
I endorse them. They're beautiful. Well played. I'm going to cleave to them. No,
You're going to cling to them. You cling to them.
That's right. That's right. Cling to them. From the Bible, it's perfect and beautiful. Yeah, no. I'm going to cling to them. No, I would absolutely run on a platform of my own demise. I would say I will not accept more terms than this. I will run, and at this time, I will either change offices or I will terminate my term, as it should. We see reps here, 435 with 6 non-voters, 2 years. So that's that. To a salty one, he clearly is going to be our between Mr. D Knuckle and all the participants out there. Thank you so much for your responses. Mr. Salty One will be starting a channel for public discourse following this show. No, it's great. Again, guys, thank you for your participation. I share it because we need to know how these instruments work, and we need to understand how to access them. One thing that I have admired over the last 5 years, though I may disagree with action, I absolutely disagree with the violent actions in all cases, but it's been the level of tenacity that many on the far left have not gone away. This wasn't like, oh, well, this is terrible, and 6 months later they were gone. But if you want to impact your environment and your government, you have to know how it works and how to access it. And they work through engagement. And that's why on the show tonight, Alex deserves credit once again, because he was raising the question, how are we going to use tonight's show to really engage? And that's why I want to say, if we're going to have a call here, it's not a call to incitement. It's not a call to insurrection. It's a call for support. It's a call for activation, for supporting one another, because this is not what we're talking about, is not something that I think is so rare. I think wanting to have a genuine media that produces information. If I may, Alex, I'm going to take one moment here to jump on, and then I promise I will hand back. When you started talking about the reactions to exposure to mediated violence. So when I was in graduate school, I had a chance to work with some professors that I really, really enjoyed working with. Dr. Tom Grimes was one, if you guys want to look up, and his wife, Dr. Lori Bergen, both did extensive work on exposure to mediated violence. And it was in direct contradiction to the big benchmark study that had come out of the University of Texas in 1997, if you guys have any interest in that at all. And what those studies basically went back and forth on was to say, do you or do you not believe that socially aggressive behavior can be impacted through exposure to mediated violence in adolescent teens? Now, Alex picked up the concept of using for shooter games and using video games, which is a big element, but movies, video games, television shows, whatnot. Do you believe that's there? The University of Texas' study said, yes, there's a correlation, and here's the reasons why. And they went into things, in multiple tiers. The Grimes and Bergen study came back and said, well, wait a minute, you're leaving off an element here. And that is, a normally adjusted adolescent will not have those responses. What you will see is that if there is some type of malformation biologically, mentally, cognitively, that can be there. So the first fallacy they wanted to expose was that you're not just going to have an immediate cortisol reaction where the kidneys, have that fight or flight response just because, and you may have that response, right? You get something scary, you get something, oh my gosh, your body reacts. That's fine. The second fallacy that they discussed was, and the main fallacy really is what I should say. There wasn't really two. This is the main fallacy that I discussed with Dr. Grimes in my graduate work, which is there's a false correlation. There's a fallacy of thought to think that just because my work discussed desensitization, meaning over time, do you desensitize to these things? Does it become normalized and you don't have that effect anymore? And what we started to work with, again, this is only on the graduate level, so it wasn't as extensive as it would be at the PhD and doctoral level, but what we discussed was this: to consider someone having a violent response reaction or an increased socially aggressive behavior and mindset due to the exposure of these things would require some type of mental discrepancy, And secondly, the fallacy that just because someone desensitizes to mediated violence, you can watch violent movies and not really have that effect anymore. It almost becomes funny. People will sometimes, you see them, someone's head will explode and they'll be like, oh, gross. Wow, that was amazing. Right? To think that someone will desensitize to mediated violence is not the same thing as thinking that someone would desensitize to actual violence. For those of you who have actually experienced situations, and I'm not trying to stress anyone out on that, but if you've been around environments that you've actually seen things like that, I challenge anyone to say that that didn't have an effect. Not when you watch something that's mediated, because when you watch something through media, phone, video game, whatever, you can turn it off and walk away. Real life, you can't do that. So I wanted to bring this up to your point about how these responses are there. So yes, psychology and biology is very much at play here. And the news in particular, I was thinking about this earlier today, the news in particular, guys, we don't have 24 breaking news hours every single day. There's just not 24 breaking news cycles every day. It's just not happening. But if you watch the news, it's actually produced to keep you that way. Think about any news channel you listen to. Do you see how many chyrons are on the screen? Look at the language they use. Alex, you brought up a great point. If I post a video about Ben Shapiro, sure. But what does every single video about Ben Shapiro on the internet say? Shapiro Hulk smashes somebody's face. You know, leftists show up and it doesn't turn out well. Right? It's always this. It's never like Ben Shapiro gave a talk at Stanford University and many students disagreed. It's always some life-altering event. That is done deliberately, I believe. And that is why many people will say, I just need to take a break from all this stuff. And many times after they take a break from media, many people say that they feel better. Why is that? There's a question to examine. Why does a simple disengagement from the media create a feeling of ease? Think about that. And then think about how many people locked down under COVID have spent the last year on every bated breath on what the media says.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly the point. And going back to your point, why is it people who go off of media, they seem to feel better when they during that period? I think it goes back to what we were saying earlier, right? It's those dopamine hits. It's that fear response. If you're no longer running off of artificial dopamine hits and fear, you're gonna become more clear. Your mind is allowed to free. You become unburdened by the artificial burdens put on you by the media. And while you're over there clanging and clunging to your to your term limits. So here, just real quick, I'm 50-50 on that one. I used to be very pro term limits, but then it also came back to, but wouldn't you want some of these other people? It's like, yeah, you always want term limits for somebody else. But I think the problem is I am like, if I would vote for them. I don't know that I would advocate for them, but I'd vote for them only because I think we can make the argument the system no longer works the way it's designed. You were supposed to go work for a few years, do your term, and then go back into private life. You were not supposed to be there forever. So I'd agree to that to a point. I actually, Mr. Dinocle, point out making Congress not paying congressmen and no PACs. I would actually want to reverse on that. No PACs. I like the idea of no PACs, but I think we need to pay the congressmen slightly more. And here's why. Whether it's congressmen, senators, it's irrelevant. The simple fact of the matter is, we need, if you're not paying them, then the only people who can afford to go are the people who are already wealthy. You actually are limiting who can go. In fact, you're really stripping those who have the ability, or who, those who might be willing to do it but have a family to feed. So they need to be paid to do that. They need to be paid well. The problem is we aren't paying them just well enough. The problem isn't really paying them. It's in all of the extravagant, sort of, what do you call it? Retirement benefits you get from retiring from Congress. That's the problem. And the stuff that you do in the stuff that you make money on the side in between. So that's a conversation to have. But I think we actually need to pay them slightly more, because someone who's maybe making $200,000 a year at a job may be willing to take, say, 8 years of his life to go be a congressman for 4 terms, right? And then he goes right back into private life. Maybe he takes a small hit to do the service, like, but then he comes, but he can he can feed his family, he can live, and he goes right back into the private industry. I think that is something that we would actually want. We would actually save money if we paid them just a little bit more and got rid of those stupid perks that you get after doing so many terms, where it's like, here's perfect health care and armed guards and free Disneyland trips and all this crap. Let's get rid of that stuff. But it goes back to, but again, a lot of this just comes back to a fundamental, the bigger issue here is politics isn't politics anymore. It's the thing that's distracting us from politics. We fight in order to not do anything. The media keeps us bombarded with fear and anger and all these other things to keep us distracted from what's really going on in our own lives, to make us powerless. Everyone who wanted Ted Cruz to be doing something somehow magically assumed that Ted Cruz had the ability to change the weather or something, instead of being prepared in their own lives. Most people weren't prepared for this storm. Every time there's a thing up here in Dallas Fort Worth, every time there's a snowstorm, there's a joke about everyone running and getting all the bread and butter and milk. Like, what do you expect to happen? Like, I got to go get 12 gallons of milk and 5 loaves of bread for this storm that may last me a week, because if I don't, all the unicorns will die. Like, it was like the toilet paper from from last year. It's insane, because in fact, I'm going to say it this way. I'm going to rip off Blade because it was a great movie. In many ways, our politics and our media, be it social or otherwise, is designed to be the candy-coated distraction from the real world we're supposed to be living in. That's why I know you hate the fact that people talk about red pill, but that's why the Matrix was such a great metaphor in many ways. Look at Naomi Wolf. Naomi Wolf, who's been around forever, all of a sudden now she's like, whoa, why is Biden doing this? And of course, everyone's like, this is what he said he was going to run on, and she's like, what? The lockdowns freaked her out, but I'm like, how could you have gone through all of last year not known he was going to do this and make it worse? But she got red pilled. Why? Because she's starting to see some things. The simple fact of the matter is, there is the actual reality in which people live. Then there's what the media wants us to be participating in. The media wants us distracted from reality, so that those in power can do what they want to do. So that we get distracted by playing the games instead of it being bread and circuses. Politics is the bread and circus. The news media is the bread and circus. Ain't none of it designed to make life better. The news media is not designed to actually make us smarter or wiser or well-informed. It's designed to manipulate our responses. That's all. They're designed to sell us on something, be it a narrative, dependency, whatever. That's what it's designed to do now, not inform. Our politics aren't, and this is both sides. You think I'm talking about Democrats? I'm here to tell you, if they're in power, it's that's who I'm talking about.
Well, this is something
our politicians.
I'm sorry, excuse me.
I mean, our politicians aren't. They're not there to actually serve us anymore. They are there to make money off of us. What we have seen over the last year is the largest transfer of wealth from the middle class to the elite power structure in the history of the planet Earth.
Sure. Well, and
that is what we've seen.
From small business to the corporations. I mean, how can we be in the middle of a global pandemic when, large percentages of small businesses are completely wiped out for forever, and yet large corporations are cashing the biggest gains they've ever had in the history of the corporation? Where's the revenue coming from, right? I mean, you're not getting a bailout to Apple computers, right? I mean, you're getting people that are buying them. Now that's shifting because of the need for people to also telework and whatnot. But let me go on a point that I think that you're getting at, and also I think Assault 21 touched on. The original use of these channels are being abused and being lost. To your point, the news was designed to inform, and a free press was designed to keep powers in check. Those have been destabilized. And as the Salty One mentioned, he was like, mentioning, he's mentioned this before, I believe, that, you want to see the original context with which you have term limits. They're called elections. And that's how it works. But what started to happen is you start to like that person, or that person comes to power, or that person has means to maintain that power. And now you've developed a political class. You've got people that there are literally people in Congress right now that have been in that job longer than many of the people on this show right now have been alive. And you're asking yourself, and that's what I'm saying. A phrase that came about recently, people I'm going to share this, and I want to be mindful how I word this, because I don't mean it to sound flippant, but I do mean it. Popularized a lot in the last 5 years was this phrase, "not my president." I think that's kind of silly. I mean, regardless of where I may stand on voting irregularities, regardless of where I may stand on my personal ideology on this, I look at it like this. Joe Biden is my president. I just don't believe he's the president, because he's not acting what I mean by that is, if you want to hold the elections that were duly this and duly that, that's fine. I'm not here to challenge that in this moment. That's not what I'm using this platform for. I'm saying, if you think that Joe Biden, the man, Joseph R. Biden, is getting up and is actively engaged in making leadership decisions about what is going on with regard to the administration, I disagree with that. And I would pose a counterpoint to say, here are policies coming out of offices and special interest groups and lobbyists that are being pushed through him, not initiated by him. And I say that with a heavy heart, because I want my president to be the smartest, most capable, most thought out, most engaged person in the room. I don't care if they're tall, short, gay, straight, black, white, of Hispanic descent, of Filipino. I don't care. I care that they're the most qualified. And I think that meritocracies across the world are coming under examination. You're seeing it in the military. You're seeing it in all types of places. And I think that this goes back to the point about stripping away the idea of intellect. We are stripping away the concept of intellect. And with it will go the ideas of belief. Unless, again, why is our show here? Unless we fundamentally understand how to use those mechanisms and how to push through them. And not always just by what exists, but by contributing a new narrative. If I acknowledge anything that's been done over the last 5 years, it's that ideas that 5 years ago seemed so absolutely ridiculous that even though I still don't agree with them, I still don't acknowledge them as thought out and logical, they have now entered the lexicon of language. We now have debates on things that, to me, feel almost like they're made up, but they have entered into that marketplace of ideas. And that is to be acknowledged. That is a force to be reckoned with. I have friends that have texted me and called me and said, I'm in the middle of sensitivity training on things, and this is the most offensive thing I've ever seen in my entire life. I have had people talk to me about that. So these things are happening, but we need to find ways to engage. The term moderate has become so, it almost doesn't exist anymore. What does a moderate mean anymore? In my world, in my worldview, I would love to believe that all of us could maintain some type of moderation in the middle and push the strongest ideas forward for the largest amount of people. But that doesn't seem what happens. This goes back to your point about tribalism, of which I believe you articulated that I presented beautifully. but what I'm getting at is that whether we want, but that doesn't make the news cycle. What makes the news cycle is Ted Cruz, whose father was clearly the Zodiac killer, is someone who's now going to go out, because these are the things that stick in the media, right? And he's the Zodiac, or he or his father was the Zodiac killer. And then now all of a sudden, because he went to Mexico, okay. Here's the thing, guys. Everyone on the channel, guess what? By next week, we're not going to talk about any of this, are we? We're going to have 5 other things to talk about that are going to be ridiculous and over the top and blown out of control just as much. And the point that we're trying to make on this show is that the problem is that necessity for fact has been replaced by sensationalism, and we've got to find ways to break those down. And I think the ways that we break those down is that we disengage using those other channels, and we engage with our leaders directly. People create those movements. I'm going to say it one last time. Whether you like what you've seen on the left or not, they have, and I'll use the word, forced their perspective to be recognized. Doesn't matter if you think it's moral, good, legal, ethical. It doesn't matter. They have forced it into the public view. That is a force to be reckoned with. And I don't want to present us as just like, well, we need to fight back. I'm not undermining what we have to do. I'm simply saying, I think the only way to take on a force that uses brute force is by having the better ideas. But that sometimes takes longer because it's more work that's involved. And hopefully we can get there.
And that's the call I want to end on, as far as this conversation goes, because for tonight, because what we need to do is actually sacrifice. Maybe we have to sacrifice time. We need to find what we all have to do, and I'm talking to myself. When I say we, I don't mean the royal we, I mean me, Alexander Keaton. We've got to sacrifice. Maybe we don't get to go out and hang out with friends that weekend. Maybe that does mean we go. I don't believe in protesting. I just don't see it actually being effective. But we do go and meet up with other like-minded people. Maybe that's at your local Republican Party. You'd be amazed. There are positions in government right now that you can run for completely unopposed and win. Maybe it means sacrificing a hobby that you like. It's going to sacrifice time. You got to find out the name and phone number of your federal and state senators and congressmen, and email addresses. Get the names and legal contact information. You have the proper, for your city, county, state. Get all of that written down. Figure out who you need to talk to. Go down again. For right now, it's still the Republican Party that we got to go through, but until something new pops up. But let's go through there. Let's actually meet up. Let's see who's who. We actually have to be engaged in this. The left got to where they got because, and again, I would argue there's even a difference between left and liberal. Like, liberals aren't left enough anymore. I mean, that's what we're seeing with many liberals who are like, this is too far out for me. The leftists pushed. They advocated. And you know what they did? They spent money and where they would have the most impact. We gotta stop watching these other channels. Focus on the channels that we want to support. Promote the ones that we want to support, and build. We have to build the culture. We can no longer. Let me rephrase this. We got here because we abdicated our responsibility in this world. We just thought everyone assumed everyone thought the same way we did. And that, 20 years ago, we hear all these crazy blue-haired people running around. And we thought, okay, well, they'll grow up and the real world will hit them and it'll be fine. Right? We have to actually stand up, each and every one of us. We have to call it out. We have to be willing to actually advocate for our positions. And no, I'm sorry, guys, Facebook, Twitter, and even YouTube, that's not sufficient. That isn't actual activism. We have to go out, talk to your neighbors, make petitions. We got to get out there and actually do these things. And we got to be willing to have really awkward and dull conversations. That's just it. And yes, a salty one. That's perfect. All that we've said here is just paraphrasing the penultimate quote, that all that's necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. Well, good people have been doing nothing for about 50 years, and this is where we got. It's time for good people to start doing things, and that is peacefully, obviously, legally, obviously. Advocating. Again, I don't believe in protest. You believe in protest, go protest to your heart's content. But I believe we have to get into the positions of power and then be willing to use that power in order to fight for what we need. That's what we're supposed to be doing. That's how the left got to where it is. But we have to be willing to do that. Because if it's, well, I want to support the guys who do, no, you have to be on the front line. Because right now, that's what we need. We've got a bunch of followers. We just don't have any people really willing to lead. We got to be willing to go out there and run for those positions and advocate for those things that make the world a better place. We got to do it, or this is just going to get worse, and we're going to just descend. And we're going to have nothing but, you think Biden's bad. The next meat puppet we have is going to get even worse.
So then let's pose a question as we let everyone go tonight. Let's pose a question and we say this. What are you willing to do for your country this week? That's it. And we leave it there. And we come back in a week.
I agree.
And we speak to one another and we find out. What are you willing to do for your country this week? Is it writing? That. Is it writing one letter? Is it calling one person? Is it talking to someone? Whatever. You determine. So for our teammates out there, for our fans, our family, our friends, what are you willing to do?
And come back and tell us.
Absolutely.
And in my parting thoughts, this last question that we have for y'all, before we say goodbye, I would like to just say rest in peace, Rush Limbaugh. He meant a lot to a lot of people. He has, in many ways, everything that he did was to pave the way for where we are now, where we can actually fight back. He took the slings and arrows of this world to create a movement that could actually fight back. Every society, every free society has at some point devolved into tyranny. We could actually be the first republic in the history of the world, the first democracy, the first free society to actively oppose tyranny before it comes. And yes, don't get me wrong, we clearly have tyranny, but in many ways, it's not really as here as we think it is. The tyranny we have is the tyranny of the mind in many ways. It isn't actually here. We think it is. We fear, and it's the fear that it's feeding it. But we could actually be the first society in the history of mankind to actually stop true tyranny from coming and reverse the ravages of this oncoming tyranny to restore freedom. We could be the first society in history to do it. And Rush Limbaugh is in many ways a pivotal actor in this movement. He may be the thing that would allow this movement to reverse the damages done and prevent it from coming to fruition. And like I said, rest in peace. Prayers and condolences go out to his family. But let's go, as we think about the question that Nick left us with. Let's go and do it for Rush. Do it for your neighbor. Do it for your children. Let's remember that there are a lot of people who took a lot of pain and have endured a great deal so we can be here. Let's pick up this ball and let's move it all the way downfield. Nick, we will see you next week. Let's figure out what it is we're all going to do, and next week let's tell each other what we're going to do for our country. Maybe it's your city, maybe it's your county, it's your state. Let's figure that out. Nick, love you. We'll see y'all later.
Take care, guys. Be safe. Thank you for sharing. And if you get to the point that you do feel comfortable to share our show with your friends and family and loved ones, we'd love to welcome them. Something we're going to discuss also is how we want to keep the format open and welcome people to the show. So thank you all for the support that you've been bringing. And remember, we focus on the light. It's always on the light. So go and do good things. Be safe. Love yourself and someone else. Alex, love you too, brother. Talk soon.
Bye.